Thank you, Nancy and Jeanette and everyone for having ShelterBox here today. I'm sorry you're not getting Allie, but hopefully I'm a good fill-in. We're really excited to speak with you all today. So I'm just going to share my screen here. Yeah. Just want to make sure that's sharing the right one. Just 1 second. There we go. Great. If you have any questions, feel free to interrupt me or I'll have time to answer them at the end as well. So as many of you will know, ShelterBox is an international disaster relief organization. We provide emergency shelter and basic supplies to help people recover from natural disasters and conflict all over the world. So why ShelterBox exists? Does anyone want to hazard a guess for me how many people were displaced from disasters and conflict last year? Feel free to unmute and throw out a number.
The number is too big.
That it is, Glenn. Does anyone want to guess?
About 10% of the world's population.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. So last year, 113 million people lost their homes from disasters and conflict. So that's more than 3 times the Canadian population. And this number is only set to grow. So we figure that by 2050, as a result of climate change and rising sea levels, that over 250 million people are going to be displaced every year. And we've seen some projections that show up to 1 billion people displaced by climate-related disasters. So ShelterBox certainly has our work cut out for us. So our vision is a world where no one is left without shelter after disaster. And we're one of the only humanitarian organizations that focuses solely on emergency shelter. So why shelter? Shelter is not just a basic human right. It is necessary for survival. But we also know that shelter is the foundation for starting to rebuild. So once people have a safe place to sleep again with their families, they can start to think about rebuilding their livelihoods, about getting their kids back in school, about rebuilding their communities. But really, you need to meet those urgent basic needs first, and shelter is one of those. So we know that when we provide shelter immediately after disaster, we're not only giving people a place to sleep and a place to stay dry, but we're helping prevent them from contracting diseases like malaria or dengue fever in a lot of the areas that we're working. We're keeping particularly women and girls safe. They're out of collective centers where we know gender-based violence can occur. And we're giving people some of their dignity to begin rebuilding their lives. So shelter is a really, really important aspect of any humanitarian response. And Rotary is such a big part of ShelterBox. So some of you may know that Rotary actually started ShelterBox as a club project in Helston, Cornwall in 2000. And since then, we've grown into a separate professional humanitarian organization, but we work very closely with Rotary in all aspects of our responses. So not only do Rotary clubs and Rotarians across Canada and around the world help fund ShelterBox's work, but we also work really closely with Rotarians on the ground in many of our responses. And this is a really important aspect of what we do because it allows us to have access to government contacts and get access to communities that other organizations may not be able to get into. It gives us crucial community knowledge to make sure that the community is the one leading their own response. And on all of the deployments I've been on, local Rotaractors or Rotarians have acted as our translators. They've helped us find warehouse space and access to communities and so many vital things that make our partnership more effective and allow us to reach some of the hardest hit areas with the best aid possible. So I just want to share with you, I'm hoping this is going to work, a video about our partnership to show you some of the impact that we have together. Let's see if this will play. It's thinking about it. There we go.
Bir yattım. Sonra işte
Oh, sorry.
şeyle uyandım. Çok kötü bir gürültü, ses. Oradan oraya fırlıyorsun. Bir baktım eşime seslendim. Koş. Sallanıyoruz herhalde. Deprem oluyor dedim. Yıkıla yıkıla çıktık.
ShelterBox is a global community. Together with our project partner Rotary International, we work to make sure no one is without shelter after disaster.
I've been working in disaster relief for around 15 years now, and the events in Turkey really highlighted the importance and the relevance and the power of the partnership between ShelterBox and Rotary like I've never seen it before. So Rotary's connections enabled ShelterBox to provide these vital shelter items to people when they needed it the most. The difference that we can make to people's lives is so much bigger when ShelterBox and Rotary work together.
I think ShelterBox is having a vital role here to provide the first, the basic needs. The bottom line is to provide the sheltering and security. That's an important dedication to what humanity needs.
Shelter is the foundation for life, a foundation for survival, stability, and dignity, enabling people like Merkel to take steps towards recovery.
Evet. Çok güzel sıcak tutuyor. Güzel yapmış yapan. Evimizi yaptığınız için teşekkür ediyorum.
So as you can see, that video just shows a little bit of the difference that ShelterBox and Rotary can make together around the world. And a lot of our responses have been recognized by the UN. We've been recognized as a leader in shelter provision, but we've also been nominated twice for the Nobel Peace Prize for our work in conflict zones. And this is a direct reflection of the partnership and how much good ShelterBox and Rotary can do together around the world. So you may be wondering, how on earth do we get supplies to so many places that we're working and so quickly after a disaster? So we have a few different ways of doing this. One of them is that we pre-position aid. So we have 5 different hubs around the world where we store aid ahead of time. And this helps us be prepared to respond as quickly as possible when something happens with high quality aid. And this also helps from an environmental perspective and a cost perspective because we can ship the aid, which is much cheaper than flying ahead of time, so that it's in high risk areas and ready to go. However, we also know that it's really important to have locally appropriate aid and to cut down our environmental footprint as much as possible. So we also procure aid locally in country where we can. And this does a few things. So first of all, if we can get high quality aid that we need in a country, it means that we're supporting the local economy, which is always great. It cuts down on shipping costs and the environmental impact of shipping, which is wonderful. And it also means that we can supplement our standard aid packages with aid items that wouldn't be available in other countries, but are important for those communities in their recovery. So every time we're providing an aid package to a community, it looks a little different because every community needs something different. So I imagine many of you have seen this ShelterBox tent that's on the screen here, either at your district conference or different events. This is the sort of standard ShelterBox tent. It's one of 5 different tents that we use. This is not your Canadian Tire special. This tent is for a family of 5, but if you were camping in it, you could actually fit up to 10 adults sleeping in here. And it's completely waterproof and fire retardant. It can sit in up to a foot of water. It can withstand 120-kilometer winds and monsoon rains. So it is a very robust tent. And then we have a few other tent options for either really hot, dry climates or really cold climates as well. But we also know that sometimes tents aren't the best option for people after a disaster. And that's why we have our shelter kit too, which you can see also on the screen here. And it's tarps, tools, and building materials that allow people to either repair a damaged shelter or build a locally appropriate shelter from scratch. Because these are significantly more cost effective than tents, we can reach more people with them and provide people ways to fix their own shelter. And it's also great when people's homes have been destroyed, if there's some building materials available, to use a shelter kit, because then as more materials become available, they can add remove the tarps and put in permanent building materials to get back in a permanent or semi-permanent structure more quickly. So it isn't to say that we'll always use shelter kits or we'll always use tents, or that we'll always use either of these. We have used other local options in different areas as appropriate as well, but we'll make sure that we're providing the best emergency shelter for that specific situation. In addition to shelter, we also provide all of the basic supplies people need to make that shelter a home and start in their recovery process. So this can include water purification, solar lights, blankets, cooking equipment, sleeping mats, tools, basically the things that people need. And again, this is completely customized. So people receive what they need and not anything that they don't. So as I said, every community is different, and it's really important that we're not providing a one-size-fits-all solution to everybody, but that we're customizing it based on what people need so that they're able to recover. And it's also really important that the local community leads their response. So we're not coming in and saying, here's everything you need, here's how to do it, and leaving. We're going in and we're speaking with the community, we're working with local Rotary clubs to understand what they're looking for, what they need, what their priorities are, and then using our technical expertise and knowledge to get that aid there, provide training, and make sure that people have support through that recovery journey. So as you can see, this is a map of where we're currently working, and it's quite busy at the moment. So we have ongoing programs in Ethiopia due to conflict as well as flooding, in Somalia due to the famine, Mozambique, Chad, Burkina Faso, and Cameroon are all conflict. Malawi due to flooding there. Yemen, Syria, and Ukraine are all conflict as well. We're still in Pakistan after the flooding last year, and in Turkey for the earthquakes still. And then we're monitoring a large typhoon that has gone through the Philippines already and is now hitting Japan, as well as the wildfires in Hawaii. So it's never a dull moment at ShelterBox, to say the least, but we're always ready, in addition to our conflict responses, which are ongoing, to respond to whatever happens next, if it's appropriate for ShelterBox to do so. I wanted to just share a photo. This is Kuka, who's from Burkina Faso, and this is an example of a local shelter option. And so it uses pieces from the shelter kit, but it makes something called a Bama shelter, which is a locally appropriate shelter for the area. And we have provided these to thousands of families in Burkina Faso. And the humanitarian situation in Burkina Faso was just labeled the most neglected crisis in the world. Over 5 million people have been displaced from their homes from horrific violence and conflict, and yet it has received almost no international attention or humanitarian assistance for the people involved. And so ShelterBox has been working in Burkina Faso for the last year, and we're working to get emergency shelter to as many people as possible to help them through this very difficult time. So before I wrap up, I just want to share a few things that might be helpful for all of you if you want to get more involved. So we do have an action toolkit on our website, and this is everything to do with the partnership. There's resources, there's fundraising ideas. We've had a lot of success with some of our fundraisers in engaging your communities and gaining membership for Rotary through that, which is great. So we always like to find ways that we can help each other. So I encourage you to check that out. I also want to mention that we have a ShelterBox Hero program, which recognizes clubs across the country that donate to ShelterBox. So we would recognize you at your district conference and on our website and provide a banner for your website, any club that donates $1,200 or more per Rotary year. So if anyone's interested in that, I can definitely provide more information, or Ron and Claire can as well. We also have some volunteer opportunities if anyone is interested. So we have a Rotary Club Champion role where we provide someone from your club with lots of information about what ShelterBox is up to feed back to your club. We have an ambassador role as well to get involved with more of the Rotary clubs in your community and act as a representative for ShelterBox. We have an adventurer program where people will do a hike or a long paddle or some sort of adventurous activity to fundraise for ShelterBox. And we have an advocate role of sharing some of our posts and things on social media to help spread the word. So if anyone is interested in any of those, please let myself or Allie on our team know. And we'd be really happy to have you on the team. Ron and Claire are both ambassadors for ShelterBox and do wonderful things, so they would be a good place to start as well. Just before I wrap up, I do want to share one story that means a lot to me, just to show you all the impact that you have when you support ShelterBox. So I took this photo. This woman's name is Diane, and her baby's name is Yokimi. This was taken in Fiji after Cyclone Winston, which is the equivalent of a Category 5 hurricane. And so they experienced winds over 250 kilometers an hour, which can bring down a concrete building. And ShelterBox worked on an island called Ovalau in Fiji. So this is not a tourist destination. It's a very small island. And we were the only humanitarian organization working in this area. And this village actually gets a little bit swampy when the tide comes in because it's slightly below sea level. And so I started talking to Diane, and I asked her if she'd be willing to tell me a little bit of what it was like during the cyclone. And there was actually a second cyclone while we were there, so I got to experience a Category 2 cyclone, which made me never want to experience a Category 5 cyclone. And Diane said it happened at night, and so they all went to the community center, which you can see to the left of the photo here, the yellow building, as it was the best built building in the community. And she said they could hear massive crashing as trees came down, as roofs were being ripped off, and there was debris flying around, that the wind was just deafening. And if that wasn't scary enough, then the storm surge came in, which can be one of the most dangerous parts of storms like this. And so Diane and her whole community had water up to their armpits and were having to hold their children above their heads for hours waiting for that water to recede. And when it finally did and they were able to go outside in the morning, everything in their community was gone. Their homes were gone, their possessions were gone, their food crops were gone, their livelihoods were gone. And I personally helped Diane set up her tent, which you can see here, and delivered her ShelterBox to her. And the look of relief on her face to have a safe place to sleep and possessions again is why I go to work every day. And it's the impact that all of you and Rotarians across Canada have when you support ShelterBox. To give someone a home when they have lost one is truly one of the most amazing gifts that you can give. So from all of us at ShelterBox, we are incredibly grateful to all of you and all that you do to help support people around the world affected by disaster. It really is such an amazing thing that we're doing together. So with that, I will stop talking, but I'm very happy to answer any questions that anyone has.